when he wrote, "We conclude, therefore, that the Egyptians were Negroid, and not only that, but by tradition they believed themselves descended, not from the whites or the yellows, but from the black people of the South. Thence they traced their origin, and toward the South in earlier days, they turned the faces of their buried corpses." Du Bois might also have added that the Egyptians themselves called their country Kemet, which many scholars interpret as land of the blacks. Now that we've learned about the origin of these ancient people, let us see how Egypt became a great African nation. Because of the surrounding desert, Egypt was shielded from invasion for thousands of years. During that time, various people who occupied the Nile Valley began working together. The Nile overflowed its banks every year. Controlling the river was important if the people wanted to grow food successfully. The Egyptians first formed villages that cooperated with each other. Cooperation led to organization, and organization led to the building of a great nation. A little over 5,000 years ago, another important step took place. At that time, the nation was divided into two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. A black man, Narmer, united the two lands into one. This followed a war in which Narmer's troops defeated Asian immigrants who had settled in Lower Egypt. Narmer became the first pharaoh or king of Egypt, following the great kings of Ta-Seti in Nubia. This pharaoh began the rule of what is called the dynasty, which is a line of kings and queens of the same family. Narmer had a glorious reign of 62 years. One of his greatest achievements was diverting the Nile River and creating the delta where he built the city of Memphis. This was the beginning of Egypt's golden age. Little is known of the pharaohs who followed Narmer during the first and second dynasties. Some of them, such as King Kasekhem and King Paa-Neter, appear to have been stern and powerful men. During the reigns of these pharaohs, Egyptian society evolved into classes. First, there were the peasants or laborers. Then came the builders, artists, jewelers, and other skilled workers. After them were the warriors, priests, and officials. Finally, there was the pharaoh or king. The women of Egypt were also an integral part of the society. Many of them engaged in the same labor that men did, and they had equal opportunity to own, manage, and receive property. There were also many prominent women in ancient Egypt, some of whom reigned during the Golden Age.
Women in particular. You have a woman whose name is Hetepheres. She is the great royal wife of Sneferu, who commissioned 3 massive pyramids, and the mother of Khufu. But in the 6th dynasty, at the end of the 6th dynasty, you have a woman known as Nitocris, and she's spoken of specifically by Herodotus as being a pharaoh, and also the person who commissioned the 3rd of the great pyramid projects at Giza. And she's called the loveliest and fairest woman of her time.
The most renowned Egyptian women ruled during the Middle and New Kingdoms. A few were even as powerful as the great pharaohs themselves. Other women were content to exercise their influence behind the throne. Let us move ahead now to the 3rd dynasty. By this time, Egypt was well on its way to becoming the extraordinary nation it was destined to be. Many of its achievements were staggering. For example, Imhotep, the brilliant philosopher, architect, and scientist, also became the true father of medicine. Through his influence, the Egyptians developed antiseptics, vaccinations, and advanced surgical techniques, and they found cures for numerous diseases. In short, the Egyptians laid the foundation for modern medical science.
Scientific medicine begins in ancient Egypt. That is to say, if we look at the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus, I call it the founding document of scientific medicine anywhere in the world. From the point of view of the sciences that we call the related disciplines of medical science, that is anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, those were organized as coherent scientific disciplines first in ancient Egypt. The first medical schools were built and erected in ancient Egypt. The first organized system of instruction and of teaching were first established in ancient Egypt. The first surgery, the first neurosurgery, the first investigations into cardiovascular physiology, all this began in the ancient kingdom of the Nile in the northeast quadrant of Africa 6,000 years ago. In fact, so well known was ancient Egypt's primacy in the area of medical science that Hippocrates would have never had the audacity to have called himself the father of medicine, because he knew better. He would have said, as Homer did, that in medicine Egypt leaves the rest of the world behind. That was accepted as a matter of fact in the ancient world throughout ancient Egypt's 4,000-year history. All of the ancient Greeks who made a name for themselves in medicine studied in Egypt.
The Egyptians also now appear to have developed their own legal system with scribes and judges, long before the nation of Greece, which was once thought to have been the seat of Western law, was born. What is more, the Egyptians invented the hieroglyphic writing system, they produced the first clock and calendar, and they introduced agricultural science to the ancient world. Above all else, though, Egypt is known for its pyramids, the bulk of which were also constructed during the Golden Age. First, there was the step pyramid of Saqqara, built by Imhotep during the Third Dynasty. This is the oldest large stone structure in the world. Originally, other buildings and courtyards were constructed near the step pyramid, and this entire complex was enclosed by a wall 1,500 feet long by 900 feet wide. Today, however, the only prominent remaining structure is the step pyramid. King Sneferu of the Fourth Dynasty built the so-called Bent Pyramid several miles south of Saqqara. This structure has no steps, but is straight-sided except for a change of angle in the middle. Finally, there was the Great Pyramid, built for the pharaoh Khufu, whom the Greeks called Cheops, also during the Fourth Dynasty. The Great Pyramid, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, is indeed a magnificent monument to contemplate. Still standing today, it originally rose 481 feet and is estimated to have contained 2,300,000 blocks of stone. The area it covers is large enough to hold the cathedrals of Florence, Milan, and St. Peter's in Rome, as well as St. Paul's and Westminster Abbey in London. The Great Pyramid contains enough stone to construct 30 Empire State Buildings. If all the stones in the pyramid were sawed into blocks 1 foot on an edge and then were laid end to end, they would stretch 2/3 of the way around the globe at the equator. There are about 80 pyramids remaining in Egypt and 100 in Nubia, or what is today called the Northern Sudan. Although scientists are not certain of the purpose of these ancient structures, it is widely believed that they served as tombs for members of the Egyptian royal family. We have looked at the black origin of the ancient Egyptians, and we've spoken of their major achievements. Now let us turn to the pharaohs who governed this great nation during the Golden Age. There were many rulers of the Third Dynasty, the most prominent of whom was Zoser. During his reign of 19 years, Egypt's borders were extended into the interior of Africa. Copper mines were exploited in the Sinai. Extensive construction took place, and the step pyramid was built. The Fourth Dynasty also brought forth a line of great black pharaohs, some of whose names we have mentioned. Sneferu was a distinguished ruler who successfully defeated the Nubians and Libyans in battle. He also constructed vessels nearly 170 feet long. He was a kind and gentle monarch. His successors were Khufu, during whose reign the Great Pyramid was built; Dedefre, whose pyramid was erected north of Giza at Abu Rash; Khafre, builder of the Second Great Pyramid, and whose facial likeness is found in the mysterious Sphinx; and Menkaure, a just and forthright ruler, whose spiritual temperament prompted many to worship him as a god. The first 4 dynasties of ancient Egypt represented a time of unprecedented splendor and glory.